get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Scott Scully of Abstrakt Marketing Group. You could check it out at Abstrakt, that's with a K, MG.com. And Scott, before I formally introduce you, I'm going to mention a couple episodes people should check out of the podcast. And since you have an amazing, growing, thriving team, and we'll talk a little bit about, you focus a lot about how do you retain A players and how do you attract A players. There was an interview I did with Chris Mersau, who's the CEO of Top Grading, and that's what they talk about. How do you attract and retain A players? And, people have heard of the book, so check out the interview I did with Chris. Also, I did an interview with Todd Taskey, who helps connect agencies to private equity when they're ready to sell. And he has a Second Bite podcast. It's a great podcast. And we'll be talking about acquisitions on this with Scott as well. So that's an appropriate interview to check out with Todd Taskey. We'll also talk about niches. Scott has been a master of going into different niches. And I had Duncan Alney on, who started Firebelly Marketing, and he really focused on the food and beverage space and niche down in that. So before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And how do we do that? We help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do accountability, strategy, and full execution of a podcast. And for me, Scott, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. So I'm looking forward to hearing your sales enablement approach. But I found no better way to do that than to profile the people and companies I most admire and profile them and shout from the rooftops and let the world know what they're working on. So if you've thought about starting a podcast, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. Happy to answer them. And I want to formally introduce Scott Scully, CEO of Abstrakt Marketing Group. He's started investing in several companies over the past 28 years, and his main focus has been in the marketing and lead generation space, with 3 companies exceeding $12 million in annual revenue. And his current venture, Abstrakt Marketing Group, has grown by a minimum of 20% for the last 12 years straight. And they surpassed over $50 million in revenue in 2021, and they're still growing. And he attributes his success, which we'll dig into, to niche focus, great team members and business partners, sound processes, and innovative workplace culture. So, Scott, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
So just tell people a little bit about Abstrakt Marketing Group and what you do.
Yeah, Abstrakt Marketing Group. We're in St. Louis, Missouri. We work in every state. We've got about 2,000 clients. And the best way to look at us is really outsourced sales enablement. So we do that hard work that maybe someone doesn't know how to do, or maybe they don't want to do it. And it's all about us helping people build a predictable sales pipeline. So we'll do everything from building a website and creating content to connecting on social, to really the biggest piece of what we do is email marketing and then phone outreach. So we've got a couple hundred people actually on the phone working on behalf of our clients, finding that decision maker and setting up that first sales call. So that's really the way that I would look at us as an outsourced sales enablement team.
We're going to walk through your company and what you actually do, because you eat your own dog food with this. But let's go back to the days when you were on the phone, and I think you said you hated the appointment setting. You liked the actual calls, and you would have a goal of doing 100 outbound calls a week, right? So what was your what was your goal at the time? What do you recommend companies out there when they're like, we want to book more appointments? What's the amount of calls they have to do to appointments they want to set up?
Well, it was actually more than 100 a week. It was 100 a day.
100 a day. Sorry.
It was. The people that are doing just the phone call piece for us actually make 135 a day, which is about 17 and change an hour. I think that it really depends on what phase of the sales process you're in. You have to understand that when we're running through our sales enablement process, a big part of that outreach may be cleansing and determining whether or not a company is actually a fit before we get into, a several dial approach towards an actual decision maker. I think there are some things that are super important, that you have your target market defined. You mentioned niches. I'm a huge believer in that, being able to come with an expertise in that particular niche and know the chair they sit in and understand what they're faced with on a daily basis. We work from an exclusivity perspective, only one in each market. So that enhances the appointment setting script. That's actually how we've been in my entire 28 years in a niche, only working with one in a particular market. So when I'm on the phone, in the scripting, it is really, hey, I'm running our market development process in the Cleveland area, and we're here within the next couple of weeks, talking to the best people in commercial cleaning. You happen to be one of them based on my research coming into the market. And, from our 100 clients that are around the country, they said, when we come to Cleveland, we got to talk to you. And so I come from that perspective and really build up why we're calling them, who they are, and why they need to meet with us pretty quickly, because it's coming and then it's gone, and want to give them the opportunity to take a look at what's coming to their market, provide feedback, and decide whether or not they want to partner. That's unique, but I do think that no matter what space you're in, product or service, that there's a variation of that you could do that makes it easier to set the appointment and makes it easier to increase your show rates.
So and there's a great video that you did. It's like a 15-minute talk. I encourage people to check it out. There's some components. I'd love to talk a little bit deeper about some of them, the components of the sales script. Obviously, people don't love doing this, right? That's why they hire you. But here's some of the things, if they are doing it now. You talk about the wow, you talk about part of the club, you talk about exclusivity, accessing someone through an influencer, scarcity, and then selling the appointment. Talk about the wow part.
So you have to get their attention clearly right up front. And so I've got to figure out what my statement is going to be that makes somebody want to listen. And before even doing that, I always say, hey, I know I got you in the middle of running your business, so I'll be brief, right? Just pardon the interruption, and just letting them know that I'm going to get through what I'm about ready to say very quickly. And then the reason I'm calling is X. And that's where I need to be pretty powerful. If I'm a managed service provider, there are a lot of managed service providers these days. So why are you different? It's really about coming up with the differentiator and giving me a good reason why I'd want to talk to you now. So I may happen to be a managed service provider that specializes in cybersecurity in the automotive industry, right? And then all of a sudden you've got my ear maybe a little bit more than it's just another managed service provider calling me. So there's got to be something that makes me want to listen. And then depending on the industry, there may be a particular case study as well. Something very quick like, hey, I'm going to get it all wrong as far as cybersecurity goes, but we're able to protect people's environments 27% more, protect uptime. People are uptimes 2 times what it typically is because we happen to specialize in your industry and know what you go through. And then it's always a question. Tell me how you're handling your cybersecurity now.
The part of the club is powerful, right? There's a FOMO involved. What do you do as far as creating this club?
Yeah. So let's take one of our industries, roofing. Right? I think we have, 102 commercial roofers around the country that we work with. In our sales process, we're talking to them about our sales enablement capabilities and the process that will run on their behalf. But also a big part of it is we know your industry and we're plugged into some of the best players around the country. And when we get together with you on a monthly basis, not only are we going to understand the problems you're facing on a daily basis, we're going to try to plug into that network and bring best practices and good ideas, things that other people are doing. Maybe you're in Des Moines, Iowa, and this person's in, Kansas City. And we want to make sure to share. And then a big part of that too is people like to share things that are working for them as well. They may like that more than getting the ideas. And so we try to do a little bit of both and create a club, if you will.
Selling the appointment you talk about, what do mistakes people make on sales calls when they aren't doing things, that, I guess?
Mini pitching. I'm just a firm believer in, I literally just yanked you out of the middle of what you're doing. And even if you say you've got a little bit of time now, you weren't prepared for me to call. We don't have a set time. You don't know me. You haven't done any research on me. I may not know you the way, like I should. And so I'm just a firm believer in actually calling that out. It's like, look, the only reason that I'm calling today is I'm trying to, shorten my interruption with you today, but it's important for us to get together within the next week or so at a set time. I just think that what happens is people get into mini pitches. The worst case scenario is it's a sales enablement person that doesn't even know all the ins and outs of the sales presentation itself. And so now I'm mini pitching and the prospect could be making a decision when I get off the phone to not show up based on what happened there. Or if I'm a salesperson setting my own appointments, because I do know about the product or service, I may, give in and give up a little bit of what I'm going to talk about next. And then when I get with you on that next time period, you as a prospect may feel like I've already talked about some of those things, and I may not have your full attention and participation on the next meeting. I just think sell the appointment, overcome the objections of why you don't want to go into particular things now and why that meeting is for that, and build up why others have found that it will be a good meeting to attend, which is super easy if you're in niches. You may be calling somebody that's at the number one HVAC company in, the Bronx, and they have been for years, and why the hell do I want to talk to you? And it's like, look, I get it, and you don't know who I am. I'm calling you out of the blue. But the reason that you would want to talk to me is because we specialize in your industry. Because I hear that same thing from all the top players in all the other states. I heard that before we got together, but then they gave me the 45 minutes. They looked at what our program has to offer and very quickly realized that they could strengthen their lead and protect their lead. And, that's why we should get together next Tuesday at 2:00.
Scott, how do you determine exclusivity do you do it via a certain mileage or radius when you're working with a company and you go in, to like the best or the biggest one in the Bronx and say, we're, What do you say as far as exclusivity, and how do you do that with your company?
It's usually to a target market. There are, I'd say 15 or so markets around the country where we would run multiple programs. Like New York's a great example. You might have Manhattan and the Bronx and Queens and right. But we may only run one program in Toledo, Ohio. Most of them are one program markets.
So when you're
but it does have a lot to do with the number of companies that we need to be able to work the process.
Yeah. When you're reaching out though, is that part of what you say is like, we're going to be working with one company in this area?
Yeah.
And it could be you or one of your competitors?
Yeah. And calling out who you may have meetings set up with already. You have to do that in the right way. It's not a threat. It's just that a lot of those industries are super competitive. And if they feel like other people have committed to sitting down and having a discussion with you, then they're going to want to do the same just to be safe.
Yeah. I don't want to threat anyone in the Bronx, especially.
No.
So let's walk through, when a company's working with you, what do you find the most effective? Because you have multiple people in different aspects of this process, right? Because you talk to the phone, you have email, you have LinkedIn. How does it work? Walk me through it, how you do it with your company. And this is obviously essentially how you do it with other companies too.
How does what? Sorry.
The multiple people you are handling different aspects of the reach out.
Okay. Well, I'm just a firm believer in a person not being super great at wearing multiple hats. So we try to specialize. So over here in a 30-day implementation process, we'll have multiple people doing different things. One group where they exclusively build target markets and deal with data. Another group that may be writing email content. If we're going to build a website for you, there's a group over here that specifically writes web pages and SEO content and deals with that infrastructure. We have, we do email campaigns for people, and we actually have people that work inboxes. And those folks are separate from people that are actually making outbound phone calls. And with that, I'll use an example of why I would want specialization. If I am working inboxes and making outbound phone calls, I'm probably going to prefer working the inboxes more than making the outbound phone calls. And so, we may not be doing exactly what we need to be doing from a phone outreach perspective. So we've got different specialties, and then they follow a very tight plan, and all those things, come together in our process to build an effective pipeline.
How do you coordinate those if, different people, one person's maybe reaching out via phone, another person's reaching out via email, another person or division of the company may be reaching out via social media or LinkedIn?
So our entire organization's on Salesforce. And we use Salesforce in such a heavy way that we actually started another company doing Salesforce consulting to help people with integrations and implementations when they decide to invest in that platform. But we have everybody tied in, processes tied in, and just run from that.
Were you considering any others before you made the decision for Salesforce?
We brought in a smaller organization towards the beginning. They had Goldmine. We changed that in a hurry. The acquisition that we did most recently, the email marketing company, they are heavy in HubSpot. I will say that we are converting most of those folks to Salesforce, but we are using or leaving some things in the outbound sales in HubSpot. I'd say those two are the players, quite frankly, HubSpot and Salesforce.
I want to go back to the volume, right? I mean, I know we were talking before you hit record. I mean, you want to or do schedule over 1,000 new appointments a month as a company. And one of those things that you do is just, you said, ruling people out to see if it's a fit or not. What are some of the things that you train the team on to, when they're doing the outbound calls or emails, to determine, do you want to spend time there or not?
Yeah. So that number is for our internal sales team. We want to make sure that to keep up with our goals for this year, that we have 1,100 held pitches. Now, in order to do that, we've got a bunch of people making outbound calls to find out what maybe we can't find out. We've built an unbelievable database. We put millions into it, but still at the end of the day, there's no perfect data. And so there's some outreach necessary to determine whether or not we want to put them on the phone with one of our sales reps. So there are a lot of things that we do from a data perspective first. We've got several different listing sources, and then we have 3 different target markets for the companies that we have. And then we take all of our campaign data and we put that together. So if we're coming into a particular market, we can see who usually picks up the phone, who responds to email, who we interact with on social. So there is a lot of things we do from a target market perspective to be as smart as we can before we go at it. And then once we're there, it's like, if I'm sending email, I know that I'm hitting multiple people within an organization, because the decision-making process isn't always the same. So I may be hitting the CEO or the president and the CRO or the CMO. If I'm making phone outreach, I've got all that data, and I'm running tracks on different titles until I determine who does make the decision. And then with each client, we figure out what their qualifiers are. If they need a certain square footage, or, they don't want to work with anybody that's less than the X number of desktops, or if the company needs to be a couple $1 million in revenue minimum or have 100 employees plus, we get those differentiators in the implementation process, work that into our fact finding and our sales scripts, if you will, and make sure that we're qualifying. So once we do put somebody on the phone for a sales presentation with our internal team or with one of our external clients, it's qualified first to meet what their specifications are.
I want to talk about retaining, hiring A players. What do you do for training, right? I'm sure, and you've talked about this in one of your talks, which is there's a low barrier to entry if you want to be a salesperson. Anyone could do it, but the people that last do ongoing training, they do ongoing education. What kind of things do you do with the team?
Yeah, so from a training perspective, when you first get here, there's a 2-week training class. We have 2 training classes a month, and there's usually 15 to 20 people in each one of those training classes. And first and foremost, I would say the most important thing is to get the best person you possibly can up front, right? Because it makes everything else that much easier. But within our training, the first 2-week training, it is a lot on how to work our Salesforce processes, who we are as an organization, what our mission and values are. And then there is, towards the end, last 3 or 4 days, some specific training around the industries that they're going to serve, the clients that they're going to end up picking up. After that, though, we're a big believer in ongoing professional development. And so it's actually mandatory that somebody has at least an hour a week of ongoing professional training. We do best practices. So in account management or sales or content or art, there are weekly best practices, so they can certainly get their training there. But we also use Litmus as a platform where we've loaded all kinds of content that they can go out and follow different tracks. And then what happens is we've got kind of our version of martial arts, if you will, but you earn belts for the number of hours or the points that you've received for training. And the goal is to become a black belt. And when we have meetings, we talk about it. We make it a big deal. You know, who's on top, who's a black belt, who's just pouring into growth. I think that it happens naturally here because we're growing quickly, and one of the reasons we attract kids right out of college in the first place is because they can come here into one position but have 20 or 30 different tracks that they could go down. And as long as we keep our growth up, they've got a lot of different bites they can take from one apple. They can stay here and grow their career in a lot of different ways. And because of that, a lot of them are pretty hungry and self-motivated to go get the training.
Yeah, no, I love the belts, right? There's a gamification and there. What are some of the resources or books that you recommend, or maybe you used that are kind of in the curriculum? It could be, a book or a resource that you recommend.
Gosh, there are so many. It's interesting that you said that. We're putting a 12-month track together for directors, and we aligned it with books. I'll send you that list, but I'll tell you about one book that we hand to every new hire, and it's called The One Thing. And
I had the author on my podcast. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
I love it. I did so much reading in the past. I'm guilty of maybe getting content via podcast or video or YouTube now, but this One Thing book just brings a lot of principles together. And what I like is that, this is the easiest way to explain it. We all build success lists and then drill down that list to the things that are maybe the easiest to do that day, and then hold over the most important thing. And, if you were just to do that number one most important thing that day, it probably impacts 80% of the list anyway. And it just takes commitment to do that. You don't always want to do the hardest thing first. So that book highlights what that domino is in your personal life and professional, spiritual. And if you're committed to figuring out what that is and doing those things on a daily basis, that's the definition of, someone still shooting for success, or maybe somebody that is being successful.
I love that. Any favorites in the kind of sales category?
You're going to laugh at me. A lot of people do. Maybe not, but I love Jeffrey Gitomer. It's easy to read and simple. And the reason that I do is because you can take it in bite sizes. And I think it's good for salespeople, especially on their entry in. And then he's added a lot of kind of ongoing content, daily stuff that people can get access to if you're a salesperson. I like his energy. I like the books and how easy they are to take in. And I know that I can get most people to be okay grabbing one of those books and getting through it pretty quickly and picking up a nugget or two.
You said, obviously, part of the reason why you have a successful company is you have a great team, you have a great company and team members, and it kind of starts with the input with the hiring process. What does that look like?
Our hiring process.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it used to look one way. I will tell you that it used to look one way, and it looks a little bit differently now. We used to go straight out of college, right? Got to have a college degree. Maybe it has to be these couple of degrees, and these are the schools we're focused on. And it's evolved because we have not really proven out that that person's more successful than the person that is, maybe 5 years into their career and want to reinvent themselves, or maybe they couldn't go to college for whatever reason. Maybe they couldn't afford it. So now they're 10 years deep in work experience and bringing like a hunger to this place and lots of experiences. So what we do now is both. We are connected to about 20 different universities, and we're in touch with their career departments. We have career fairs at probably half of them. We have what we call a college ambassador on 5 different campuses. That's, they're responsible for going and talking to the professors and shooting over the fraternities and sororities and just building up the name and the brand and trying to get people to come and work here. But then we're just working just as hard at trying to find people that want to reinvent themselves, or people that didn't go to college but have incredible work experience. And we've got a pretty sizable recruiting department, and we're probably doing some of the things that everybody else does in the way of posting ads and doing things on LinkedIn and making calls. And our recruiting actually for ourselves, because we have to recruit 30-ish new people a month to keep up with a little bit of our phone turnover, because not everybody loves it, right? And then our growth as well. Because we had to recruit that many people, we actually started a recruiting division, and now do recruiting for clients.
Do you allow remote, or does it have to be in the St. Louis area?
If you are outside of, I believe it's 50 miles, then you are allowed to do remote. We have some employees that are in different spots around the country. Maybe they started here and moved there. Maybe during COVID, things happened, right, where people said, I'm going to live somewhere different, do something different. If you come here and live by here, what you do is earn your way to a day a week in the first 6 months. And then by the time you get to the end of the first year, you get 2 days a week out. And then we rest at that. So in office 3 days, out of office 2.
Yeah. For companies like that who are still trying to navigate this kind of hybrid culture, talk about your thoughts and importance on having them come in. Obviously, it's important for you to have them come in a couple days a week at least.
So, gosh, if you're in the LinkedIn landscape, there people just are mean to each other about this, right? It's like, I don't understand why you can't set principles up and say, as long as someone's doing the work, why would you care? And then some people are like, well, it's about collaboration. It really depends on your organization. For us, when we have a lot of new people I'll just take the people right out of college, for instance. They're coming right out of college into something brand new that they don't understand. They're facing rejection all day long. Like, to put that person immediately in their house for 5 days, they don't even know how to use Salesforce yet. And then even when they get a little bit better at using the process and doing the work at home, maybe you have a down day and you're not surrounded by others that are having success. For us to collaborate, like, the education that we can give somebody quicker, development in the beginning is important, and then the collaboration and just what we do. If someone's having a down day, it's easier to be surrounded by others to pick them up. I am not saying somebody can't work from home. I am saying most people can't. Some people can. Most people can't. They think they can, but they're not great at it. I like the hybrid. We do have good days at home, but I firmly believe it's because they come in, get that energy, they collaborate, then they go home, they got a full day where they don't have meetings and they're set and they have a good day at home. I like the hybrid.
Let's talk about, you bring up a good point, because there's a lot of rejection people are facing with this, whether it's email, phone. And you talked about this a little bit in your talk that you gave about the mindset. How do you reset your mindset when you're going through, and there's little rejections, whether someone's in sales or not, or just a lot of rejection depending on the day. How do you reset your mindset, or how do you have your team reset their mindset when they're facing all this rejection?
That's a good question. I think I have two answers to that. No, number one, and it's kind of unique to the individuals. You have to find out what works for you just to keep your mind right and stay motivated. And that's being healthy and, having your routine and in the morning, or what you eat, or how you sleep, or what you drink, or who you surround yourself with. And there are a lot of ways to go about that and a lot of different opinions, but you got to be doing the work to show up in the morning feeling as good as you can feel to start. From there, I find that if they can connect to the client they're serving and the purpose, then it's easier to break through the rejection. So what I mean by that is, we talk a lot here about really at the core, what we care about most is impacting lives through building sales pipelines, which sounds kind of goofy, but if a business is set from a new meetings perspective, they can feel comfortable about growing or at least staying their same size, their employees, their employee growth. We're impacting that. So just as an overall mission, if I'm on the phone doing that hard work, if I can think that I'm impacting lives, I may change the business that I'm serving, then I don't know, the person that swears at me or hangs up on me, that doesn't hit me as much. And then the other thing in that is, I think that people get into sales and they make it something that it's not. That, like, a lot of people say, well, I don't have that kind of personality, or I'm not a salesperson. And although they've been doing some of those things we're asking them to do their entire life, like negotiating to the front of the line, talking mom out of the car keys, getting their friends to go there versus, where their friends might want to do, this party versus that party. People naturally are doing that, or people are naturally connecting others. And then they get into sales and they make it this thing. So if they think, look, I'm serving my client, the client needs me, and I'm just trying to find people that my client may be able to help and connect them, and maybe both of their businesses are better. If I'm thinking about that, it's easier to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. A lot of times the lifeblood of a business is a predictable sales pipeline, right? And if they're thinking of it as that, of helping that, growing that company, and securing, creating security for that company, I could see that for sure. That one person hanging up is not that big of a deal.
Right.
Talk about the niches. You serve, and it's important that you served certain niches. How did you come to the niches that you ultimately decided on?
Well, in the onset, when you're starting, I think that you take whatever business you can get, right? Especially in marketing. So we did that in the beginning, like I'll build a website, or, I'll send some direct mail, or I'll do that radio commercial. But then you start growing up a little bit and figuring out what you do best. We made products, turned our marketing into products. And then we said, okay, what's working the best? So in the beginning, we picked one or two. And then the way that evolves is we'll get referrals from clients. So we have this quote unquote other bucket of clients, if you will, that aren't necessarily core niches in our sales department yet. But we find out, hey, in our fulfillment process, wow, we can do a good job in that niche. And then that rolls into our sales enablement department. We design territories, and then all of a sudden, those success stories are in our salespeople's hands, and we're working that new niche. I'm a really big believer in it, though.
We mentioned before we hit record, Scott, about, obviously you can continue to grow, and you're putting infrastructure in place so you can handle that growth. So what does that look like right now? How are you putting in infrastructure?
Yeah, so we're just shy of 60 million and wrapping the year up, and we really wanted to put the pedal down. We really felt like we had our products designed and how we fulfill. Nobody has it all the way figured out. You're always improving, but we really feel like we know how to fulfill our products, and we were ready to really step up growth. So we picked $80 million number, which is going to be our biggest growth number, $20 million in 1 year. And what that meant was we need to hire more people. So we've got to build out our recruiting department. We need to be able to implement a larger number of clients. We've got to pull some people over to implementation. We have to write more content. We have to pull more lists. So we had pretty much modeled out what an individual person can do in each one of those areas. And then we looked at our growth and did the backwards math and put the people in place so that we can make sure to actually do things the right way. Growth is a problem a lot of times for companies. And God knows over the last 28 plus years, we've made plenty of mistakes. And I think one of the most important things we've learned is if you're going to grow, you got to plan it out and back into it and do it the right way and really model out what people you need, when you need it, and have that plan in place, not just grab $20 million and be running as fast as you can, trying to hire people after the fact. You have to have it done beforehand.
What's cool about what you do, Scott, is that when you bring them on and they're helping your company, it's similar things they'd be doing for the other companies. So when you're training them, it seems like it will help your fulfillment also, because that's what they're doing for you. One of the ways you've grown is through acquisitions. So I'd love for you to talk about, and you structured them in some unique ways. Talk about, one of the acquisitions and how you structured it.
Yeah. So we were running up against a company that was in town here. And they were doing, we were doing at that point, a lot of our mainstay was the phone outreach, and they were doing lead gen 100% or primarily through email marketing. And kind of going after some of the same niches. We were running into each other. And so, for a couple of years, I would actually get together with that gentleman in town here, and we'd just talk about strategy, and we had a lot of the same philosophy, and it just made sense for us. He needed to add phone calls, and we needed to be better at email. And so it was just a sweet spot for us. And they had a bunch of clients, and they'd done a nice job. They had, $18+ million in annual revenue. And so we put it together, and we had to go at it creatively. Didn't want to just, pay X amount up front. And so what we did is we creatively put a deal together where Jeff got to take some money off the table, a nice chunk. And then he got 2 more chunks over the next 2 years based on performance. And then in doing that, if all of that was hit, then he actually got shares in our overall organization. So for us, it wasn't as much up front, and it wasn't as much up front for him either. But if he did a good job, it was a way better deal for him, over the long haul. And then, of course, because he performed, it's a good deal for us as well. So not everybody's willing to do that. People might want their money now, especially if they're getting together with a group of people that they don't necessarily know. I think it helped that we'd been having discussions for a couple of years leading up to that, for us to be on the same page. But a creative deal like that worked out for all of us.
How do you navigate integration of the teams in the company?
I wish I could say that I had that perfected. There's different schools to thought. I know when people are doing roll-ups, a lot of times they just leave them alone, right? And in this scenario, because the email was becoming such a substantial part of our overall product, we really made the decision to just integrate everything. And it was a little painful. There was a difference in the cultures, a tiny bit. And, we put some managers together and talked about overlaps and just tie-ins and vision and what it could be. And then actually last year, our theme for the year was one team, one dream. And it's because we really were still 2 families, acting a little bit in a different way. And we had to break down the walls and do things differently and get groups of people together and become one family. And when we did that and established one culture, it really worked. We changed some of our value statements to incorporate, some of that companies that, which made them feel good. We incorporated some best practices, and just made it a focus. And then we took some key people at both organizations and had them be over, bring them over to the other company or have them be over groups that maybe served both. We just had to blur the lines. It's hard though. And if I were to do it over again, I think that I would have just ripped the Band-Aid off right away. If I'm going to integrate, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it right now, and I'm going to do it quickly. If I'm not, and then I'm going to leave it separate, I'm going to do that.
Scott, first of all, I have one last question, but thank you. Thanks for sharing your expertise and knowledge. It's really amazing what you've done with your company and also being a staple in St. Louis in general. I want to point people to your website. They can go to AbstraktMG, that's ABSTRAKTMG.com to learn more. And obviously you're they're hiring. So, or if you have, if you're a possible partner for them, contact them. If you serve adjacent niches and don't do what they do. So the last question I had is, I want to tell people to check out your show, the Growth Show podcast, and talk about how you're utilizing the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It's called The Growth Show, Stories from the Front Lines. And we really wanted to put it together for 2 reasons. First, we wanted to put it together for our clients. We've learned some things along the way in growing our organization, and we wanted to pass along some of those best practices to them. A lot of our clients are starting up or, a couple $1 million, and they've got growth ahead of them, and we've been through some of that before, and we just wanted to make it a little bit easier. And another thing we wanted to do with the show is train our people internally in our organization. We've got 50 for 50 segments. So one of them's 50 for 50, and it's just how to set up an organization for growth. One's 50 for 50 and just sales tips, and one's mining for growth or lead generation best practices. But we want our people, internally to know and to grow in those areas. And then they're better consultants for our clients as well when they take that knowledge in and go. And then from a prospecting perspective, we do a lot of outreach. And as we're connecting with people on LinkedIn or sending emails, making phone calls, whatever it may be, they're not all saying yes right now. And so we wanted to be able to provide good nurture content. Hopefully they plug in, take a listen. They like some things that they hear. And next time when we're trying to get a hold of them, they're warmed up and ready to have a meeting, or they may even call us if they like what they hear.
Love it. Scott, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone check out Abstrakt with the KMG.com to learn more and check out their growth show. Thanks, Scott. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.